It's the second day of camp, and you can anticipate a good percentage of your frontline staff going to their supervisors declaring, "The kids aren't listening to me." What do? What do you say to them? Going backwards, what should you have done during training that would have helped them have better tools? For this universal topic, we bring in Emily Golinsky, our resident camper behavior expert, who has a bunch of webinars this spring that I highly recommend for your leadership team. Lots of good stuff in the show notes for you. Check it out. This is the Day Camp Pod.
This is the Day Camp Pod from Go Camp Pro, bringing you the best ideas, strategies, and discussions in the day camp industry. You can find our show notes at daycamppodcast.com.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will ensure that your camp thrives. Explore their website today at CRS4Rec. CRS is serious about fun. Scheduling shouldn't be so difficult and take as much time as it does. Come check out Camptivities to learn all about their scheduling tools, and they're specifically designed for camps by camp people. Save time, get rid of the mistakes, and get back to enjoying your summer. Find out more at camptivities.com. Let me tell you about CampMinder, the #1 camp database in the world. It has the most robust offerings of service features found anywhere. Every feature works together to create a full, seamless system that helps your camp office run more efficiently while giving your camp family state-of-the-art communication and financial tools. Check out the details at campminder.com. Welcome back to the Day Camp Pod. I'm Andy Perdikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And I'm Jordana Grosinger, Director at Camp Robin Hood up in Ontario, Canada.
And we are joined today by the one and only, the great Emily Golinsky. Whoa! So good to have you back, Em.
Thanks for having me.
So the concept of this is based on, I saw Emily in Dallas at ACA National, and she did this wonderful, wonderful session about behaviors. To me, Emily is our industry expert on teaching staff how to deal with camper behaviors. You really do a great job of translating that. And I know, like, you come from the special needs background. I always feel special needs folks have better insight because of that. So,
that's because when we're working with kids that don't have those identified challenges, we're like, oh, easy peasy, and it's not easy.
No.
But when you're used to the intensity of behaviors, it's actually like a release to be able to just talk about quote unquote typical behaviors that kids have, right? It's fun for us.
Right.
It's our vacation.
But when you deal with staff who are, let's say, youth development neophytes, right? They're just the first time staff people. They don't know what is like normal behaviors, right? They don't know what is like age appropriate versus inappropriate, right? And I think that you do a really good job of that, of explaining, do you anticipate these behaviors because they're normal, kind of stuff. So anyway, as I was, telling Emily how great she was, which I do all the time,
which I appreciate, so don't stop.
She was like, well, I wanted to do this session, which got turned down here at a tri-state, and it's called The Kids Aren't Listening. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think that would be a great session, because that's what I hear about week 2 or 3 from, a third of my staff. They're like, help, the kids aren't listening. So that's why we brought you in. So I want to dive right into it, Emily. What was, when you were coming up with this, is that what you were thinking too? That at some point, they think that they're going to make it on the staff is going to make it on their personality, and then all of a sudden they realize.
Honestly.
Yeah.
That is, yeah. I mean, so I spend time traveling around the country. I work with camps all over the place. And well, now I can say I'm international because I've gotten the wonderful opportunity to be up in Ontario with Jordana and the OCA folks. But right. And literally from almost every single one of the camps I work with, this is their biggest concern right now. The kids are not listening. And it's not necessarily camp leadership, but that is what they're hearing from their staff, right? Their frontline counselors are just overwhelmed. And they think, well, I'm the adult. And so if they even think of themselves as adults, but they're the adultiest person in the group, I guess.
I'm tall. Right.
Yes. Right. Don't let the t-shirt fool you. You are the adult in the group.
And, I have new leadership people that think the same thing. I have a collar and a walkie-talkie. Shouldn't they then just succumb to my presence, you know? But yeah,
I mean,
no,
that is what status symbols are all about, Andy.
doesn't work, but it doesn't work, you know? But let's just talk about that for a second in regard to behaviors, okay? Because even though you have this little cherub face and you look like, you know, a lot younger than you may be, you've been doing this for a while, right? And I just want,
Yeah.
I get sort of perturbed about the whole kids today kind of thing, you know? Like, I don't think it's that much different. I really don't. Like, I think a lot of the stuff that you teach is applicable also 10 years ago. You know, yeah, and I think that if anything, the counselors have changed, right? I think that kids are generally pieces of Play-Doh that we're molding, you know, and they're predictable in many ways.
I think our
I
attitudes
really,
have changed towards them because our age,
Right.
you punished, you controlled. Now we're trying to make the kids feel safe and figure out what they're telling us. And that's a whole mind shift for staff now from the old, you will obey me, and otherwise I will punish you.
Yes, we can't be as draconian. That's true.
Well,
Right.
it's so
Yeah.
good we have Emily here because I wonder if there's shifts in camper behavior, and if you've noticed in seeing all the
Right.
camps that you do and having your experience, like, is it the shifts in camper behavior that are the challenge for our frontline staff? Is it that like misalignment or understanding of our frontline staff in dealing with these? Where do you see that kind of coming from?
I love where we've taken this, and I'm going to pick up on that word you just said, Jordana, which is misalignment. There's misalignment, right? So when so your Gen X and, you know, even your older millennials, but when we all were younger, there was outdoor time, there was unstructured play, there was all of these different things. And we also had bigger families. We had earlier childcare responsibilities. Our young staff that are coming in now, our Gen Z staff, even our younger millennial staff, they were not raised that way. They just weren't. There was a shift in parenting. And so, Andy, in a way, you're right. Kids have been very similar over time. And in a way, I'm going to respectfully disagree. The kids have actually changed a lot. And the challenge is the influence of tech. And I'm not going to be like, you know, when I was a kid, we didn't have phones. I mean, we didn't, but you know, it's a meme, right? That like we stayed outside until the streetlights came on. We drank out of someone's water hose. Okay. Kids today don't do that. Our staff did not do that. Right. And those formative years involving smartphones and social media and the digital entertainment means that our campers want their lives gamified. They expect tech. Camp feels, I mean, Sandra, you use the word punishment. For some kids, camp feels like a punishment because their tech has been taken away. And for the rest of us, we're like, but you get to be outside all day. And they're like, boo, Minecraft. Right. So I think there is a misalignment a little bit because our staff also don't have the depth of experience that they're coming into the job. Most of them have not even babysat. And if they have, there's also been an adult home. Right. I'm getting well known for saying that when I was 12, one of my jobs was to go down the street every morning and help some neighbors' kids get ready for school, get them dressed, get them fed, get them on the bus. I was 12 years old. In some places, it is now like illegal to let your 12-year-old off the bus alone in the afternoon. A parent or guardian has to be there. So there is a very significant difference in the way kids are being raised. And therefore, when those kids become staff and they come into the camp environment and they are responsible for just slightly younger kids, they are lost. They are truly lost. And I think if we are still training them the way we were 10 years ago, we are missing out. We're missing that connection and help. We're not getting them the foundational skills they need to work well with children. So then, yes, they say, you need to obey me. And the children laugh in their face and are like, what kind of XP do I get for listening to you? And that it goes downhill from there.
Right. And because these kids, they're not even used to obeying their parents, many of them. But, you know.
I don't think the word obey even comes into it. I think this generation is very much about talking things through and gentle parenting and all of that. And there's no right or wrong or good or bad about it. It's just different. And so we need to change the way we train our staff for their own needs. And then we also need to train them what to expect. Like, kids are not miniature adults. These staff were kids 5 years ago. And for some reason, they have completely forgotten what they were able to do. And their expectations for some of these campers is off the charts.
Yeah.
So
No,
there's
it's true.
some changes that we need
And
to
they're
make.
looking for a magic pill. When they ask this question, right? The kids aren't listening. How do I get them to listen to me, right? They think that like I'm literally going to tell them a password or something, and it's going to give it to them like a silver bullet, And I always just jump to the first thing, which is you have to have a relationship with them. They have to know you. You have to know them. You can't just be this person that's just dictating, telling them what to do. Nobody wants that, right? And if you're an 18-year-old, managing, I mean, look, I know camps where people are managing 25 kids, like, how, it sounds like a
Don't get me
daunting
started.
thing. Yeah, no.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, look, I was at that YMCA thing with you. I talked to a bunch of people there, and it just make sure you have one-on-one conversations with kids. Make sure you really get to know them. Like, you can't just solve it with one day sitting, for 10 minutes in a circle with everybody talking about introducing themselves. Like, that's not going to cut it, right? So, I mean, do you believe that if you were making a hierarchy of like things, would that be number one is relationships or what, Em?
Yeah, it is. And when I do my trainings, it is literally slide number one. They need to build the relationship bank, right? So you cannot go into a bank and ask for money that you don't own. That's called stealing, right? You can't do that. You'll get in a lot of trouble. You have to make deposits along the way in order to withdraw later on, right? And so you need your staff to be making deposits and have a direct relationship account with every kiddo that they're responsible for. Somebody graciously used the phrase behavior expert. It might have been you earlier on in this podcast referring to me. And I appreciate that. I have to say that I'm kind of a little bit jazzed that I've heard that a couple times now. Here's the thing though. I could walk into your camp, Jordana, or your camp, Sam, or your camp, Andy, and walk up to a group that has been, that staff member is just totally overwhelmed and super stressed out. And they point out the kid to me and they're like, okay, behavior expert, like, let's see your magic. I have no relationship bank with that kiddo. So I am actually in that moment going to be less successful, most likely, unless I'm really scary looking, which we've already acknowledged I am not, right? I'm going to be less successful working with that kiddo on the spot. Where I can be helpful is in giving resources to the counselor that has built that relationship, right? But behavior expert or not, the person who's going to have the best chance of connecting with that kiddo is the one who's put the work in. And what we want staff to do is to have an idea that in this relationship bank, right, you're feeding a piggy bank, 3 positive interactions, 3 deposits for every withdrawal. So if you're going to have to correct a kiddo, if you're going to have to ask them to change their choice, if you're going to, even if you say it incredibly kindly, it's still a withdrawal. It's still a withdrawal. So then those staff members should be thinking about what are 3 ways that I can deposit into this relationship, kindness, just checking in with that kiddo, building that relationship. There's a million different ways. And the reason I really like that analogy or metaphor or whatever it is that if you have a kiddo that you are finding it to be more challenging to work with that kiddo and you are making more withdrawals, you also need to be making more deposits. Right. And so it is reminding staff that like when it gets really hard, they also need to be intentionally putting positive time into continuing to build that relationship so the account doesn't run.
You have to have credibility with the child. If they don't know you. Yeah.
Right.
They're not going to let you sit there.
One of my absolute favorite memories of the years I was working as a camp director is, walking up to a situation and trying to help a staff member that was clearly foundering. It was like the second or third day of camp. I hadn't really been outside of the office very much. And so this kid, I was like, hey, are we listening to our counselor? What do we need to do? The kid says, who the HE double hockey sticks are you? And the counselor turned like purple and was like, there's the camp director. And the kid was like, I don't care. Right? Like, and they were like, you can't talk to her that way. She owns the place.
Yeah,
I was like, well,
no relationship. No relationship. That's such a great point. Yeah.
But I think,
he doesn't care.
Yeah. And this happens all the time at camps, like no matter the size too. And especially at day camp where the pace is so fast and you have to manage all those things so quickly. I think it's so eye-opening of how many responsibilities our staff have in a given day. The other year I did a survey and was like, what was the thing that surprised you most about your experience at camp? And it was that they had to be on 100% of the time, and especially at day camp, right? And so how do we, I still don't think we make it explicitly clear that you have to build a relationship with the kids, right?
Yeah.
We say
No, we have to.
you're going to
Yeah.
be with the kids all day. You're going to be with them. What does that mean? And I wonder those tips of like how to make that explicitly clear to staff and giving them that magic pill, like you said, Andy, and like what that looks like, because I think they sometimes just don't know what they don't know too, right?
Yeah. No, we have to spell it out. And the relationship bank is a great metaphor. I heard
I
that
could
first
picture a bit.
30 years ago from Bob Ditter. Shout out to Bob Ditter.
Did you really?
I did. I have
Oh,
a
cool.
handout. I have a mimeographed handout.
Well, now
from
I
it
know where I
from
learned
way
it. So
back, way back in the day. No, it's great.
But can't you picture?
And
Wait, but look, hey, can't you picture, Andy, like a giant cardboard piggy bank up on the wall at staff training, and every staff member has like a giant cardboard coin, and they write on it like one way to like positively connect or build relationship with kids.
Love it.
And
right,
then like
what are
that
ways
piggy
to
bank
make
is full.
deposits, right? Because it's a great
Right.
metaphor. But if this is the first time I'm doing that, I don't even know how to make a deposit. What does that even mean? Right?
Exactly.
You know, like
Exactly.
you have to do nice things for them. You have to talk to them. You have to ask them about themselves. You have to, all these, there's so many things. And I think that one of the barriers here also is, like you said, the kiddo that needs more deposits is actually the kid that most counselors are going to avoid giving most deposits to, right? Most counselors are drawn to the kid that's like they are, which is generally the outgoing one, the easygoing one, the one that, oh, I wish if I have a kid, it's going to be like this. That kid doesn't need as many deposits, right? It's the kid, the tough kid, the kid that needs to forge that relationship the most. And just one last thing, that this is just so relevant. Also, I always talk about how camp is synchronized, that the relationships from the counselors to the kids, the same as the middle management to the counselors and all. And it's the same thing. How do you get the counselors to work hard for you and to do things for you? It's the same thing. The middle management people, you have to build relationships with them and put money into their bank too, right? And your middle management people can't just be barking orders and say it's because I have a whistle and a walkie-talkie, right? So anyway,
Although, frankly, actually putting money into their bank will help.
yeah,
Unfortunately, you can't pay your children.
No,
but
we do.
actually paying
We
your
already
staff
do,
will-
damn it. The actual money doesn't really work. That's really an important point. That's just part of it, right? They're not doing it for the money. They wouldn't be working for you. You have to be putting like emotional coins into their bank.
Well, the thing too, you were talking about like staff getting kind of fed up or tired, or like I'm working really hard at this. It's a lot of withdrawals.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will help ensure that your camp thrives this summer. Check out their inflatable aquapark courses for pools or lakes, the prime carts, the cool little go-kart things, the emergency alert and lightning detection systems. Whoa! The splash pads. Whoa, if you got the money for that, splash pads is the way to go with the heat we got. The Zoom Flume. A lot less money and talk about the most awesome order of slip and slides that you could possibly get. The jumpers, okay, for bouncing all around the place. Mini golf. The prefab cabins and pavilions and bathrooms. The shade structures. Lord, do we need shade structures these days. The shade structures cannot be beat. And of course, the playgrounds, including the ones with the cool musical components. Anyway, CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source. Explore their website today at crs4rec.com because CRS is serious about fun.
One of the pieces to think about when we're planning staff training and how do we prep our staff for this busy camp environment, right, is to think about how this generation looks at emotional regulation. The generation as a whole is highly exposed to stress. They have an immense amount of anxiety. This constant access that they've had to social media and, a world on fire means that a lot of their emotional regulation is not fantastic. And they also live in a burnout culture, right? Staff are always being pushed, hustle, have a side gig. Most of them go home after day camp and have something else going on, right? The problem with all of that is an emotionally demanding role like camp counseling they don't realize that they're signing up for something emotionally demanding. They assume, oh, I looked at your website, all the kids look happy, everyone's great time. Well, yeah, because if we put crying kids on the website, nobody would sign up for camp, right? But the reality is that is not what camp looks like on a day-to-day basis. We can all talk about how fun and amazing and wonderful and spirited it is. And anywhere you look at day camp, you got a couple hundred kids hanging around. A few of them are going to be crying. A few of them are going to be grumpy. A few of them are going to be having a rough day. And when your staff are in an emotionally charged environment like that, and camp feels overwhelming, and staff are already feeling depleted by like their own stress and anxiety before the day begins, when they have that disrespectful behavior, when they get pushback from kids, they don't have the emotional capability to stay calm and patient. So then they start spiraling, and then kids feed off of that energy, and it becomes this hot mess. And you can literally, I'm sure you've all seen it. You watch a group disintegrate before your very eyes. And you're just like, OMG, what is happening right now?
It's sad.
When you were talking about the middle managers, if you're out there enough that you know some of the kids and you see something starting to escalate, sometimes just modeling how to take care of it, but you need to talk to them later. For example, Colton. We had a room with 300 kids eating lunch on a field trip. And I looked over and he's clenching his fists and he's about to lose it, but he's trying really hard not to. And I knew him well enough his counselor was like, what do I do? This kid's going to explode. And I just went over and sat down. And I said, Colton, I see you're working really hard. What can I do? And then we finally realized, hey, there was another room. I said, grab a buddy and we can go sit and eat in that room where it's quiet. And he knew me well enough to go, okay. And then he was fine. So then just letting the counselor know, it's all right. I've got him for now. We'll be back. Because she's like, did I do something wrong? Why did the camp director just take him? But knowing him well enough to see the signs, and then knowing enough, her getting to know me enough to know that I was just helping and giving an example of what to do for him because I knew him and I knew his triggers. So, and you were going to talk more about the tools. If you don't know the kid, the general tools, and how do we get those to our staff if we can't model it in the moment? So
I think we need to, what you said about getting, coming over and just, that staff person worrying, oh my gosh, the camp director is here. Why did they have to take my kiddo? I think with this fairly anxious generation of staff, it's essential to talk about these things openly and transparently during staff training and say, like, just to be clear, my job isn't just to make sure everybody gets on the bus or whatever, right? Like, I'm not just doing paperwork all day. Like, part of my job is making sure that everyone's feeling emotionally safe and physically safe. And middle management, leadership staff, whatever you call them, directors, we come over not because you're not doing it right, but because we can see that assistance would be beneficial. So if somebody comes into your behavior situation and offers help, right, graciously yield the floor, especially if it's a supervisor or a director who might have been doing this, 50 years longer than you have, graciously give them that space. And let's assume best intentions, right? Let's not catastrophically assume that we were doing it wrong, that we're going to be fired, that our camp director thinks we're, crap at our job. Let's assume that someone saw us struggling. We work in an environment where we care about our people. We don't let them struggle alone. So someone came over to help you. Wasn't that kind of them? And like shifting that mindset at the outset of the summer so that staff don't feel guilty and that they are willing to ask for help because they realize that they're not going to get in trouble for not doing it the right way. This generation is one of the biggest challenges that they have is that they have grown up with viral moments, right? Think about if you are 6 years old and you do something ridiculously stupid and your parents film it and throw it out on the internet and all of a sudden it has 47 billion likes.
You could be the next wrestler.
This is the thing, but imagine the pressure of growing up in an environment where anything new you try could be a viral moment that comes back to bite you 50 years later. So that's how our staff think, right? What if someone's got a camera? What if someone's phoning this into YouTube? Like, as we speak, I know I just sounded really old, but right? Like, what if that's on TikTok tomorrow and they don't want to be seen, so they don't try because they're afraid to fail in that way. So letting your staff know during training, you're not failing. You are trying. You are taking initiative and we see you. You've asked to be seen. We see you, so we're coming over to help. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
So we talked about forging relationships, how that's the most important thing. And in your presentation you just did at ACA New England, shout out to my northern friends, your slide number 8 you put here, okay, I love it. It's my favorite 2 things here. It's prioritizing social connection and belonging. And you just have so much great stuff about how to put money in that bank. Because, I use the phrase also, Emily, friendship skills. These do not, they do, you don't just get born and they happen, right? Like they have to be honed and they have to be modeled and they have to see it in order to, and to me, that's the thing that my counselors do is teach friendship skills. Like that's one of our big things. So really being clear as to how to be a friend and to even role play and with resolving conflicts and such, and showing kids how to include other people in the game and stuff. Like they don't normally do these things. You put doing intentional icebreakers. I thought that's great. Encourage storytelling. Have campers share fun memories instead of just facts about themselves. Stories are the best, 100%. And the counselors need to know that, like, that's part of their thing. Like kids, they just hang on to your every word. So tell stories. I mean, my best counselors, they make shit up, right? And the kids just, did that really happen? Yeah, sure. Yeah, why not? There's just so many of these little things. But
how are you training your staff to do that, though? How are you getting them to have that skill? Because to be honest, any of the camp directors I talk to, their staff don't know how to do these things.
No, frankly,
I don't see it being prioritized in staff training.
Well, number 1, I'm modeling it. Okay. But number 2, I'm encouraging it. And that's really all I could do is model it and encourage it. That's really it. And cross my fingers, right? And jump into the deep end. But you wrote on the slide, how, the thing that, my son talks about all the time in his sessions and stuff. It's like we're growing up in this, like, this hyper-connected world, but everybody's actually disconnected, and this kind of stuff because of what you're saying there. I mean, this is not natural. It doesn't come natural to people anymore. And we do have to sort of teach it. And I tell my friends who are business owners who complain about the 20-year-olds working with them, how they don't have any of these skills. And I'm just like, hey, guess what, buddy? Part of your job now as a boss is you have to teach these people these skills. Because if they didn't come with it naturally, that's just part of our deal.
And 100%, those skills are part of what we do at camp. It's on all of our websites that we're going to teach all of those things. But I feel like for our staff that feel like there's so many things they have to keep track of, they're like, how am I even going to get to teaching friendship skills if I can't even get my kids to line up properly, right? Like, are we going back to basics with our staff of saying, how to get from point A to point B, how to sit and listen, how to be an audience. I know we get together at our flagpole and I have like 7-year-olds playing with the rocks. I'm like, guys, we need to focus on kind of that before we can get to the other pieces. I think it goes back and forth. Sometimes the friendship skills have to come first and vice versa, but we need to be more explicit of how we're telling our staff to do it. Because what Emily was saying before, I have a vivid memory. Like every summer this happens. We finish pre-camp. They're like, we're ready. All our staff are like, yeah, I got this. I met the kids. I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm excited. And then like day 2 of camp, so we have a staff meeting on the second day. They all turn to their supervisors and like, none of them are listening to me. I'm doing everything you told me to. Absolutely nothing is, you set me up to fail. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. And we're like, everyone take a breath, right? And I think what we fell in love with about your session, Emily, and the title of one of them that Andy shared with us was "The Kids Are Not Listening to Me." And so it's like, what do we say to those staff on day 2 or 3 of camp to say, guys, remember what we talked about? How do we revisit? That's where my mind goes of like really where we can be helpful in supporting our staff and campers.
I think that.
So I love that question.
I was just going to say that you alluded to a lot of important stuff there, Jordana. And I think that day 1, we have to have our people trained to set these boundaries and this is how we line up and go to our things. And this is how we do this. I think that a lot of young people have never done it before. They think, again, the kids are just going to listen to them. So they're freewheeling. And they don't put the structures in that they really need. And I try to explain this to the staff over and over in training, even when I hire them, that, you're going to think that you want to be the cool You want to be the coolest counselor in the world, right? And in your mind, you're going to think that means permissive at times, right? And and I draw the metaphor of the teacher. You ever had a first year teacher that like the kids just crap all over because they have no structure in the classroom? Like it's the same thing. Like you're right. You can't teach these friendship skills unless you get the 101 organizational skills down. 100%. I think that's a huge, huge point.
And so, Emily, what are some of those tangible things that you've been talking about at these conferences about like how to pinpoint that?
So I think part of it is to teach the staff explicitly how to communicate their needs, right? So most of us talk in long sentences. That's just how we are used to talking. Young generation kids, right? They thrive on short, direct, visual communication. Think about them all walking around with their face stuck in a phone, right? They speak in emojis. When's the last time you communicated like you sent a meme? It said everything. It was one picture. It said everything, right? And it didn't need any other explanation. So teach your staff to think about when they're speaking out loud, how they can sort of mimic some of that, right? Bring a little bit of the tech world into camp without actually having the tech in their hands. Tell them to be very direct and visual. So instead of saying, okay, we need to clean up the changing area, guys. We got to get this cleaned up, right? It's a mess. Say, pick up the clothes, hang them on the hooks, shoes under the bench. Like explicitly tell them, make a word picture, and kids are going to listen, right? Instead of just saying, line up, right? Use a gesture, picture, like the guy at the airplane, right? Like with his little sticks in his hand, like bringing in the thing. Because when you use that gesture, not only are you telling them to line up, you're telling them exactly the direction that you want the line to go in, right? So they aren't just surrounding you with 14 lines and you look like a giant octopus, right? So part of it is rethinking the communication style, right? Ambiguous instruction, they're not going to go over well. And I think a lot of staff think they're communicating clearly, and actually they are not being heard because they're using way too many words.
Yeah.
The
Middle
other thing I'm
management
going
people
to
do the same
suggest,
thing.
and of course we do. Of course we all do. But what we need to understand is how these kiddos' brains work. And this was where I was saying to you, I was going to, respectfully disagree with you. And the kids are different. Their brain chemistry is different. The way they own up with shorter sentences, with more visual cues, with a very different style of interaction, they actually do not respond the same way as kids 10 years ago or, 20 years ago when many of your middle management worked for kids or, starting to take care of kids. So when we think about what is a kid used to, we teach our staff to gamify responses, right? So using a visual prompt like a thumbs up, thumbs down, right? Oh, when we say, ew, I don't like your lunch, is that a nice thing? Are we being kind, friend? Thumbs up. Or is that feeling mean? Thumbs down, right? Adding those visuals, giving them the gamified, oh, I click this, that's the right answer sort of concept is going to connect kids to listening to adults better. And someone recently in one of these trainings asked me, they're like, well, isn't that kind of pandering to kids? Like, shouldn't we be teaching them proper communication skills and everything? And there's a part of me, the grammar grouch, editor of the college paper, like the person that had that book about, grammar called Eats, Shoots, and Leaves, which refers to pandas. But anywho, right, there's a part of me that's like, yes, children need to learn to speak properly. They must address an envelope by age 7, right? And there's the other part of me that is trying to understand that kids are different now. And proper communication for a child in 2025 is not the same thing as proper communication when I was a child. That's where we need to go.
My absolute favorite graph or slide that you have is the graph of the de-escalation or the dysregulation and then coming down. And then the next one where you have the markers and all you say is, shh, that's perfect. Yeah. We tend to talk too much and then they stop listening, or they might not have been able to hear us in the first place at that point. So,
yeah.
It's normal to say, everyone find your water bottles and meet me by the benches in 5 minutes, right? That's a normal thing that we would all say. This group of kids is going to hear you so much better if what you're saying is benches with water bottles, 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's circle back a little bit to the common situation that was mentioned earlier, where here's this staff person having a little bit of a breakdown because the kids are not listening to them, right? And then they come to you, right? So you're the unit leader, you're the director, you're whatever, right? You're a person of knowledge that has no relationship with this kid, really. How how do we get it going? How do you suggest? How do we mentor this kid? Like this group, like Jordana was saying, is halfway down the toilet bowl. We want to put the plunger in right now and help. What advice do you have us?
Exactly, but maybe I wasn't listening very well. So, all right, the first advice is, and I know this is gonna inspire hate mail, but the first advice is we need to stay calm ourselves, and we need to make sure that counselor is emotionally in a place to hear and receive help. Right. So yes, camp is all about the kids. In that moment, you stressed out, overwhelmed staff member, the first thing that we should be doing is checking in with them. Right. So they're like, I don't know what to do with this kid. I'm out. Like, I just can't, And the first thing I might say is like, how's the rest of the camp day going? Right. Or like, when's the last time you took a minute to take a deep breath and like get some water? And they're like, I've been running with these kids since 7 a.m. Awesome. Why don't let's take a walk and go get some water. Let's just take a deep breath. Let's get away from kids for a few minutes, right? Because we understand too that regressive pull, especially as we get further into the summer. The more time people spend with kids, the more they act like kids, right? And so if your counselors are already emotionally dysregulated and stressed out, and then they're around a bunch of hyperactive kiddos all day, you're going to see them kind of come to you in a very hyperactive, highly energized moment. So let's get them feeling a little bit more calm. And then I have prepped my staff at the beginning. I hope this is what I'm recommending you do, that you prep your staff at the beginning of the summer, that you do not prefer problem announcers. You prefer problem solvers, which means come to me, tell me the problem, and I'm going to ask you, what have you tried? What have you tried already? How can I help you? What kind of help are you looking for? And what solutions have you already thought of that we can talk through? Right? I think one of the biggest challenges is that staff don't stop and work through the problem. They just come to an adult. That's a generational thing.
Ask Siri.
Right? So we want them to stop. But absolutely. Why not? She's always there.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So imagine during staff training, if you were to ask your staff, if you wanted to go see a movie, okay, how would you find out the movie times? Raise your hand if it's in a newspaper. How many of your staff would actually even know what a newspaper is? Let's start with that, right? How many of you would call movie phone? 1-800-movie phone. Remember that, right? How many of your staff would go to a laptop or a physical computer and open a website? That's old now. How many of your staff have never done anything except be like, Siri, where's the movie playing?
No, you're asking
Right?
Siri, Alexa, or Google. One of those three ladies will absolutely take you to the right place.
And they're fantastic, but that does not prepare your staff to solve a problem in the moment when they don't have Siri. So as much as it maybe feels like pandering, what if the question you were to ask is like, okay, reframe this question as a, hey, Siri, if I wasn't here, if you weren't asking me for my help, what question are you asking? Probably it's going to be, hey, Siri, how do I get this kid kicked out of camp? But
no, it's how do I get the kids to listen to me? I mean, that's going to be the question. And look, there's some staff who never ask for help. And then there's some staff that literally ask Siri, which is their supervisor, every time they have a roadblock. I get it. So yes, so part of what we're doing is getting people to be critical thinkers. I get it.
And I think what I hear,
they don't have that.
They don't have that. And I think what I'm hearing, Emily, too, is like, and I think you mentioned this in your slides, just about that frustration tolerance, their ability to sit in that discomfort of like, I've tried it. And the go-to is I'm just going to give up, because this era of staff, like their lives have been filled with not a lot of practice doing hard things and either making mistakes, rebounding from mistakes, or pushing through them. And so I think it's like their stamina, right? And it's frustrating when we're like, well, you should just push through this, because it's that whole thing. Like, we push through it. Like, and we can all think that. And how do we teach that patience and increase their tolerance a little bit more? Like, it makes my mind think of like, what can I do at staff training to create scenarios, maybe not even with kids, but just with something that's really hard, and see how they do, and model what it's like to coach them through that, and then do a reflection of like, hey guys, this is what you're expected to do every day.
Yeah.
What do
Sometimes when it rains during staff training, I actually like it because of that, because the experienced people could care less and just plow right through it, and it's not even there. And then the new people, like, it's cold and wet, and you could sort of bring that to light and sort of explain that. But you're 100% right. Justin always talks about how when he was in college during the pandemic, that he was brave because he turned his camera on during class. Like, it's a different set of expectations, no doubt.
For over 100 years, summer camps have been an integral part of the AM Skyer world. AM Skyer is a strategic partner for summer camps across the country, building personal relationships and providing valuable resources to their clients and friends. Every day, AM Skyer is proud to support camps and make them safer. Skyer was founded by Abe Skyer in 1920 and is now the third generation of Skyer family leadership. My friends Henry, Jeffrey, and Amy, and the experienced AM Skyer staff, they eat, sleep, and breathe summer camps while fostering partnerships with camps that last for decades, if not centuries. Give AM Skyer the opportunity to find solutions for your most challenging insurance needs. I can tell you firsthand, they truly go above and beyond. Learn more at amskyer.com. As a camp director, you're a leader of your camp and a pillar in your community. When your customers put tremendous trust in you, CampMinder's powerful management software tools deliver the day-to-day task support that helps you make every touchpoint moment memorable and every summer stellar. CampMinder has the most user-friendly platform for both your staff and your parents, and is backed by a team of crafty engineers and customer service associates who are constantly thinking of ways to optimize your camp's database, communication, and financial management. With state-of-the-art app for your camp families and an API available for third-party softwares, CampMinder is always evolving elite summer camp software. Check them out today at campminder.com.
Well, and when you're asking about like, what do we do during staff training, Jordana? Like, okay, so very explicitly, what are we going to do to set up our staff for success? First of all, less scheduling and logistics. They can read that online at home at any time, right? More training on interacting with kids, building relationships, how to receive pushback from kids without spiraling, right?
Yeah.
And this generation of staff, they're going to learn best interactive, collaborative, not through lectures, right? So we're going to role play. What happens when you get that pushback? Like a little bit of inoculating, right? With like, this is what you're really going to see. Now you've signed on, you're here. We're not worried that if we send you a thing ahead of time about how terrible the children are, you're just going to quit and never show, right? Somewhere mixed into the fun and excitement of orientation should also be, okay, like, let's prepare you for the emotional weight of being a camp counselor, right? So that when it happens, you're not caught off guard. You're not first trying to teach your brain to do this. You are relying on a little teeny bit of muscle memory, right? Because they've never done it before. Setting up check-ins that are about them as well as about their group. So when your mid-managers and supervisors are going around, they're not just asking the staff, how's your group doing? They're asking, how are you doing? Right? How are you holding up? What do you keep showing up for the rest of the day? Right? Because we need to see our staff, right? And they need to know that they are seen. And if people are still using things like feedback sandwiches or any of that kind of thing, this is the gluten-free generation, folks. No more feedback sandwiches, okay? It doesn't land. You can't do it. I mean, I could tell you about the new like feedback wrap, but like, we need to make sure that we're connecting authentically with our staff. And then during training that we're letting them know that like, we care about you as humans. We want you to do your best work. What does it look like when you're doing your best work? What does it look like when you are stressed out and dysregulated? So that when, like saying like what you're saying, when you're walking through camp and you've noticed that staff person is struggling, you can be like, okay, this is them struggling a little. This is them struggling a lot. When should I step in? right? The emotional capacity and self-regulation is a big thing. That is something we should all be working on during training with our staff. How do they self-regulate? Do they know themselves, right? Sometimes you might even think about doing like self-care plans with them so that when they are stressed out later in the summer, pre-camp them, happy, excited about the job, totally regulated, ready to go. Said, here's what happens when I get stressed out. Here's how I can help myself. And then you just sort of pull it out in July when they're in your office, like, I can't help myself, and you're like, well, this is what, June you thought before you met real life children. Like, let's try some of these strategies.
And it's also knowing how to deal with the
it's-
emotional regulation of the kids, right? Like Sam was saying earlier, sometimes one or two kids throw the whole balance off because they're so flummoxed by these kids and trying to resolve those issues instead of giving them a little separation and let them, sort of be able to chill out and normalize a little bit. You can't just necessarily keep them all together doing the same thing all the time.
That's such a good point, Andy. And Emily, I know you talk about this a little bit, but it's like, how do we find that balance or coach our staff to find that balance between like the individual needs of the campers and those behaviors and like the group needs? Because let's be real, it's like a whole cabin with 2 staff. They're going to archery and one's taking one kid to the health center and the other one has all these kids and one's melting down or climbing a tree or something, right? And I know the staff's going to look at me and be like, I tried everything, I just can't. And we want to be supportive, but those things happen, right? And it's what advice are we giving to our staff in those situations?
Well, it's funny. Not only do they happen, but I found myself when I was listening to you ask the question, I found myself thinking, is it a staff member that's melting down and climbing the tree, or is it a camper that you're referring to? Right?
Yeah.
Either way, I think, look, I am different than a lot of my, colleagues that do training and consultation for camps, because I am very open and honest about the fact that I believe that there's a camp for every child, but I do not believe that every camp is the right camp for every child. And one of the things that I have to say out loud, even though I feel like it's starting to become my soapbox, is if you see your staff struggling with like low-level repetitive behaviors from one kid, and you're like, but it hasn't hit our behavior matrix yet, right? This is just no big deal. They're just disrespectful. It doesn't bother, like, that's not a call home. Okay, but what is the mental health of your staff in that situation? What is their ability to focus on the rest of the kids? The reality is that at minimum, whatever other essential characteristics a child needs to have in order to be successful at your camp, at minimum, camp is a group-centered environment. A child must be able to understand and general, with reminders, support, expectations, blah, 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 be able to exist within a group structure. So when we enroll a kid and we assume, let's say the ratio is 1 to 9, that parent is paying for 1/9 of that staff member's time and attention for their kiddo, right? If we boil it all down, that's what that parent is expecting, that their kid is getting 1/9 of the attention. If you have one staff person off at the health center, like you said, Jordana, right? And then you have another staff person who is with one kiddo who's now taking 2/3 of that time, all of a sudden the other kids are not getting what they have signed up for. Now, if that happens for a few minutes, once or twice a day, okay, right? We can give that grace to everyone. But if it is happening consistently, right, that one kid is using more than their allotted ratio of staff support, we have to think about how it's affecting the other kids, how it's affecting that staff person who's frankly going to burn out ASAP. Because we've talked about our staff are not built for long-term emotional regulation of children, right? So I think part of it is prepping our staff to understand that we see them and we are willing to over-escalate on the behavior matrix, even for small stuff, if it's happening a lot, that they don't have to have a kid that punches another kid in order to ask for help, right? If you've tried your strategies, if you've tried 3 times and this strategy is not working, get your supervisor involved, right? And understand that we know that not every kiddo is going to be successful at camp. And if we're in that situation where you feel like you have a kiddo who is not able to be group-minded for the majority of the day, please tell us so that we can get you support. We can get you ratio support. We can get you behavior support. We can get you inclusion support, whatever it is, while we're trying to figure it out. I think the biggest mistake that we make is leaving counselors kind of hanging in the wind, and we're like, all right, over, yeah. So it's only 2 more days of camp this week, and next Monday we'll figure out a new plan.
So we
Is that
could
staff
even
person going to come back next Monday?
we can even get them tools. I get the comment all the time, why can this kid have this and the rest of us don't have that? Well, FAIR isn't everyone getting the same thing. FAIR is getting what the child needs to be successful. So, and the kids really get that. I mean, so at first the counselor will be like, they're not going to get that he is allowed the fidget and they're not. If they need the fidget, they get the fidget. But having
Agreed.
those tools that help take the emphasis off just that one counselor in the moment that can help them work through their own stuff. So
Also shortening activities. So I know a lot of us haven't looked at our camp day, the way we do our schedule for many, many years. Like it's rinse and repeat. Maybe we change a little thing here, snacks 5 minutes adjusted or whatever, but we have not looked at the way we engage children hour by hour for a really long time. And if we haven't looked at that, we should understand that the average kiddo today, we're talking about 15 minutes is going to be like the extended version of their attention span, right? Think again about TikToks and content and what they're used to seeing. It's so crunched up into little moments. So when we give them a 60-minute activity and that kid shot 6 arrows, sat back down, shot 6 more, sat back down, and now it's time for their 3rd trip around, it's boring. When kids are bored, they're going to create their own fun. That's going to stress out our staff, right? So what are we doing to make sure that a 60-minute activity or a 45-minute activity isn't actually setting our staff up to fail by making them run around and collect, 15 dysregulated kids who have done the activity and are like, okay, what's next? So thinking about
I think most day
leveling
camps
up.
most day camps are half hour, and they're probably not even a half hour. How long are your activities, Sam, at your camp? Typical activity period?
Yeah, not that long. We've gotten shorter and shorter, just, because waiting in line is a plan for disaster.
Are they half hour generally? What are they?
Usually about 15, 20 minutes.
Wow.
And then while the ones that are doing the archery, we have them playing a game on the side. We have transition games and things that they can do so they're not just sitting in line waiting.
Got it. What about Camp Robin Hood, Jordana?
Ours are 25 minutes. So yeah, we fit in 2 swims in the day for everyone. So it just
us too. But we're 45 minutes. But we have no passing time, so they end up being closer to like 35 minutes generally.
Things like boating take longer because you have to prep and get out there and get back.
But mine are generally longer than most camps. There's no doubt about it. So going back to that conversation with the staff person who's struggling and giving them some ideas. So a couple of things in your slides that I really liked was encouraging unstructured play. I think that, these kids are so used to just being told what to do, and it starts beating them, right? And then to actually have time where the counselors could just play with the kids, whether it's at free swim or just on a field or whatever. That is a really
But you have to teach the counselors how to play. I agree with you, Andy. And I just want to say you have to actively teach. So if you want our counselors to engage kids in unstructured play, then when during your staff training are you teaching them how to do that? Because they don't have any clue.
Yeah, we do that because we actually have free play as an actual scheduled period. And my instructions are you're playing a zone defense and you can play with the kids, but they're in charge. Okay. It's a kid-centered period. And that usually gets
what would happen if you gave a bunch of staff like a bunch of junk, recycling crap and, cardboard, rope, art supplies, and then invent a game, right? Could they do it? They'd have to stop and think about it, right? So if that's what we want them to let the kids do without getting overwhelmed, like, oh no, he's using scissors, that's not a good idea. Or like, oh, this one's running around with the cardboard saw, what are we going to do? Like, we might need to let those staff practice.
Yeah, and
free play on their own.
I'm worried about the scissors, Emily. That's the big thing.
But you know what's funny is I did this last year in training. I actually did kind of like a period where I put out toys and games and said, okay, guys, you have the first 10 minutes of the session to go do. They were so uncomfortable. No one knew what to do. They were
Flummoxed.
looking at me like I had 3 heads, like, George, are you actually just letting us play? Like, isn't this a session about something? I'm like, this is the point. This is the exact point. But it just opened our eyes to the fact of how challenging it is for them to do it. So then to be in charge and also let other people do it is so tough. And what I'm hearing a lot of as we talk is just how important it is to set everything up. Set training up, but like set the environment up, set your schedule up, set all those things up so it lends itself to maybe reducing those demands as much as
Yeah, set
possible.
up the structure.
Yeah.
One of the best sessions I went to at Tri-State, I think Sam was sitting next to me, was with Michael Brandwine when he was talking about how to run a meeting. And it was so defined and so wonderful. And because, just so many people sort of wing it. And first of all, we have to model not winging it for our people. But that just goes back to what I was saying, like how to line up, how to go from activity to activity. What are the rules, right? In the group, having your group sit and make rules, for yourself and things like that. Like creating those structures. You can't have the good stuff happen unless we're creating, the structure for it to take place.
Well,
Plain and simple.
nowadays, more than ever, I think the counselors need to know they have permission to go in the art closet and take something to make a project out of. They will not do it anymore unless they know from the beginning they have permission to be creative or to, do a random game. Where I feel like a long time ago, everybody kind of did that because they were used to more free play. Now we just have to make sure that they know it's okay. We encourage it. It's great. Go in there
Yeah.
and grab the stuff you need for silly putty. You're not going to be in trouble. Just tell us we need more of it so we don't
La-
run out.
The last slide in your presentation was great, Emily, also as well. And we're going to put this in the show notes, whether you like it or not. All right. But
Okay.
since I
Go
have
ahead.
Yeah.
Me slides are shoe slides.
Celebrating small wins and everyday magic.
Yeah.
Which seems so common sense in a way. But again, it's like, we also think it's common sense that why don't you ask, that to get some arts and craft supplies, right? So I think when you set expectations and kids are meeting these moments, you need to celebrate these moments and you need to make these kids feel good. And if whether this kid looks at their counselors like they're LeBron James or Wonder Woman or whatever, and when they are celebrated, by their heroes at the moment, that sets the standard. And then the kids want to aspire to do that. And then they know that it's cool to be kind. It's cool to do the right thing, to help each other out and all those kind of things. And yeah, I just think that it works. At my camp, we have these little fuzzies, that we have these little fuzzy celebrations. We started doing beads, which is a big Boy Scout kind of thing to, this beads for this and this beads for that. And the kids get into it. And by the way, what are we doing? We're gamifying it, which is a modern way of
Absolutely.
doing
I was
it.
just going to say that you are
Yeah, but we're
leaned into
doing it
gamification.
old school. We're doing it without technology.
As you absolutely should, but right, like, I mean, all of us play games, all of us are on apps, right? And it's the instant feedback and the reinforcement of progress, right? When you think about like old school games, like old school Nintendo, you had to actually get to the end of an entire level, before you could save. Kids today would lose their minds, right? There's save points all along the way, right? And there's always opportunities, for recognition along the way. So if we should do it old school style. I'm not suggesting that we bring tech into gamify camp, but the idea of mirroring that online game world with weekly wins and short-term challenges, right? A group is struggling, so we give them a mission, right? With some like checkpoints along the way each day, so that they're working through something, and we are creating those opportunities to find a way to catch them being good. Because if we have to wait until the end of the week for, group of the week or honor tent or something like that, we can't wait. And frankly, neither can the staff.
Right. And I'll put that in the show notes of what we do. But that's why the beads is
Great.
good, because the beads is instant, and they really respond to them.
And I think, Andy, it goes back. It's funny. We like bookended this with that relationship building piece. Like throughout all of it, it's all about those relationships. And so when your favorite counselor looks at you and praises you for something like that, or you get something from them, that makes them feel great and it's going to be motivated. And it's that in real life game time. Like it's all those things working together to support both the counselors and the campers all at the same time. So all goes back to relationships, always, as it does in camping, right?
It does. It does. You can't just boss people around. It doesn't work. Right.
I mean, I think if more of us said that out loud to our staff, if like, welcome to staff training, here's what we want you to remember. You can't just boss people around. If we started with that and ended with it, we would probably have more successful staff teams.
Yep. No doubt. All right. Well, we're out of time. Ms. Golinsky, thank you so much for coming back on. We really appreciate it. And I just have to say, today's opening day for the Mets that we're recording this, and they're beating the Blue Jays 5-0, Jordana. So just want you to know, little FYI. All right.
We'll get you
that sounds like something you all should work out amongst yourselves.
No, listen, it just happens to be that's where she lives, So we want to thank our friends at
just to be clear. Wait a second. Wait a second. I'm sorry. I know you have to do your spiel, but I just would like to know, if the Blue Jays were winning, would you have made this announcement?
I probably would have. It would have been a little more morose, but I probably would have.
We'll see next time when I wear my Jays hat. We'll see how that goes.
All right. Sorry, Eddie. Go.
No, it's quite all right. It's quite all right. And it's a good point now. Yeah, I'm a big sports fan. Win or lose, I just enjoy it. Anyway, thank you to Campminder, AM Skyer, Commercial Recreation Specialist, for bringing the podcast to you. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the Daycamp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out the show notes from all our episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for our show, for Emily, for me, and Sam and Jordana. Thanks for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Day Camp Pod.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by Go Camp Pro and the Go Camp Pro Podcast Network. Find a podcast for camp professionals of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Thanks for listening, friends. Hey, Camp Pros, we love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, we hope that whenever you share an idea that you learned from the Camp Hacker podcast, conference, summer camp professionals group, or wherever else, that you're quick to give credit where credit is due. That way, we can all encourage more camp pros to share the tips and tricks that will make camp better.